Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the All for Women's Football podcast. Today, we are with you for a quick 7-day roundup because there's been lots going on as we head into the international break. I'm joined by Laura and Irvin, so let's get into it. Okay, lovely to have you all with us. I hope everybody is well. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Irvin, for joining me. Laura, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. I've realised that I'm in the wrong position on the screen. You're hosting, so you need to be in that corner. So I'm going to swap us around. There we go. Right again. I was like, oh my God, am I hosting? But no, we're all right. We're back in our positions. So yeah, no, I'm really good, thank you. Not bad at all.
Amazing. Yeah, all gets a bit confusing, all of this swapping around. Irvin, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a Chelsea fan, so it's good to see us win again this week. So yeah, excited to get into this.
Amazing. I am glad to hear it. Well, we will jump right in. We've already got comments coming in about England, which we will come to very soon. But first off, we'll talk about Chelsea. I was at Kingsmeadow yesterday for Chelsea versus Man United. It was 1-0 for anyone who hasn't seen it. Just a Guro Reiten penalty in the first half was the deciding goal. So, Irvin, as our resident Chelsea fan, I will come to you first. What was your initial reaction to that performance and that result?
Yeah, I think first of all, windy conditions, very tough game. Couple of games in the non-league were called off this week, so just good to see things getting underway. And I thought Chelsea were great, but not perfect. I thought there was room for improvement. I think only 5 shots on target. Dominated the game, but could have created more chances. But I think, as Sonia Bonpasta said, we could have done a bit more in possession. Of course, it was a great high press where we won the ball, and 5 seconds later we won a penalty and go right and scored. Yeah, but I think overall, I think we are coached by a manager who has won the Champions League. She knows what it takes to win a competition, as big as the Champions League, and 5 times in a row. So it's I think it's important for us to keep going. And if you're going to be a bit more critical, Chelsea haven't scored from open play in 180 minutes. Both goals against Celtic from corners and a penalty, and another penalty this week. So I think that's something we could improve on. But 11 wins in a row for Sonia, and I think that's great, something great to build on.
100%. Yeah, I think that was one of the main things that I took from the Chelsea game yesterday was just their ability to, again, have not the best day, but still get the 3 points. Was talking to Jamie from the halfway line about it, and she said the game was, to her, very similar to the United-Arsenal game, which Arsenal drew with United, whereas Chelsea have still won it. And I would probably argue even that Arsenal were probably looked better against United than Chelsea did, yet they still didn't manage to get the 3 points where Chelsea did. So yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. It honestly wasn't the most exciting game, and it wasn't the most pleasant sitting out in that wind. But yeah, Laura, did you manage to catch any of the game or any highlights or anything? Did you have any thoughts on that result?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting result. I sadly didn't get to catch much of it. I saw the Guro Reiten penalty, but watching a penalty doesn't often give too much about a game away. So yeah, but I think in terms of like looking at the result, it feels quite significant in terms of what it means for Sonia Bonpasta, and Irvin was obviously speaking about this, but it's just more, she's racking up more wins against what you perceive as more like the bigger tests in the league. And arguably that United squad isn't the biggest test she'll face, but beaten Manchester City, they've beaten Manchester United, they've beaten Arsenal. And it's like, what are they going to come up against that's going to prove a tougher challenge than any of those three? So I think it's quite a scary prospect potentially for the rest of the league that they are flying so much in the way that they are, in terms of kind of what's going to stop them at this point. I do think there's going to be, like, you get to the latter end of the season and it's those tests of like you've got to juggle that with the last stages of every other competition, Champions League. They're likely to get far in domestic cups as well, and so that can be more of a trip up where you're looking at like, this is a lovely time to play all those games, absolutely. but it does really feel like they're a force to be reckoned with at the moment. And I think it also, and we'll come on to Emma Hayes soon, but it just speaks to her legacy, because what a team she's left, I think, is a real sign of a good manager when they can leave the team in such a good place.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because something I said, so for anyone who doesn't know, me and Irvin are on the same course, both studying Masters in Sports Journalism, same course that Laura did last year. And we were talking about Emma Hayes and Sonia Bompasta on Friday. And something I actually said was, oh, isn't it a little bit funny that maybe some of us are now thinking, oh, was Emma Hayes really that good if Sonia Bompasta is now doing the same thing? But that's actually a really good point. Maybe it is, you can also look at it in that sense, that maybe it is even more of a testament to Emma Hayes, because she left the team in such a great position. So yeah, that is a really interesting way of looking at things. But lots of thoughts in the comments. We've got Justin here saying, Chelsea fans have been so smug for years, bet they had a heart attack when that Mallard shot hit the post. Yeah, that was a big moment for United. To be honest, from where I was sitting, I thought it went in. And then it carried on, and I was like, oh, obviously not then. And I was honestly thinking, oh, we're going to have another conversation about goal line technology, but I must have just been watching it at a funny angle, because clearly I didn't hear anyone else say that, so clearly it didn't go in. But yeah, it was honestly, at times United were they would kind of go forward and they'd have these really good moments, and then in the first half anyway, and just nothing would come of it. And then same, I would say, right immediately after half time, I thought, oh, hang on, maybe they're going to come back here. And then it looked like that for 10 minutes, and then they just kind of fell apart. Sorry, Connor, if you're watching this. But yeah, I thought post-match was interesting as well. I don't know how much you guys have seen of kind of post-match comments, but I think it might have been Jessie Parker Humphreys who tweeted a comparison between what Sonia, nearly said Emma Hayes then, what Sonia had said and what Mark Skinner had said, and the kind of different mindsets that seem to be being picked up on there. Because Sonia Bompasta, despite having won and being on this phenomenal unbeaten streak, saying, oh, we need to improve, like we weren't clinical enough. Whereas Mark Skinner's kind of like, oh yeah, was happy with the performance. And everyone in the press room was kind of like, are you? Really? Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I just wondered if either of you had any thoughts there, or if you've had a chance to speak to any other Chelsea or United fans. What do you feel the general consensus there is on the two managers? I'll come to you first for that one, Laura.
Yeah, I've not, I mean, I follow Connor, so I've seen a lot of United opinion through those channels, and I know there's a Chelsea fan on my course as well that I speak to, and he's obviously very happy. I feel like that's the overriding feeling from there. I love Sonia. His was mainly just, where can I get a vintage France Bompastor shirt from? So I think that's the mood emanating from that camp. In terms of the United comments, it does really feel like quite stagnant, in the sense that you want, as a club and as a fan, you want to feel like you're aiming for the top of the league. Like, whether that is a realistic target or not, which I think actually for United this season, it looked like they had really good recruitment. It was quite an exciting summer for them. And each time you kind of think, oh, maybe this season they're going to challenge. And I was getting quite scared as an Arsenal fan, thinking, you know what, they're going to be a really good entity. This battle for the top three is going to be really hard. And that's not to say that it won't be now, but it very much feels like it will just be that battle for the top three for United. And can they get Champions League? It's not like this title aspiration that you'd expect from a club with so many resources, so much kind of history as a football club. Like, they're expected to do that because they've kind of set themselves up as this force in women's football that are going to come in and make these changes. And actually they continuously fail to do that and live up to their hype, and have done throughout their history pretty much since, like, even I was listening to the Reimagine podcast with Casey Stoney, Tobin Heath and Kristen Press, and it was really interesting. The kind of same things that she was saying about her job, about just not being supported in the right ways and trying to push for that. And it feels Mark Skinner is obviously content with his position because it keeps him in a very big job. but she eventually left because she wasn't being supported or didn't feel the players were being supported in the right way. And I'm not saying that there is that lack of support, but there's that lack of ambition, and it seems to still be there. And I don't think the ownership is necessarily going to change that. So I can completely see where there's a frustration there, and their performance on title aspiration performances, if he's happy with them.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree, really. I don't have much to add to that. Irvin, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, just diving in on Mark Skinner, I think United fans have every right to be frustrated with him. But on the flip side, I do think that United played quite a decent game against Chelsea. 1-0 is a respectable scoreline, and there's obviously a big gap in quality between both sides. And apart from being a bit sloppy in possession, maybe in the build-up phase, I thought they were generally quite compact off the ball, limited Chelsea to a few chances, and didn't concede from open play. And they could have nicked the point if Mallett's shot went in. It was a great save from Hannah Hampton. So yeah, that was a nervy moment for me. But I do think that it's a lot easier to coach a team in low block and like counter-attacking football than to organize a team well in possession, which is the challenge that Sonia Bonpasta has obviously lived up to. And I think that's the reason why Skinner has come under such fire this season. He's drawn against Villa 0-0, and he's talked about it as if like it's a huge result when it's against like a relegation contender. 41% possession at home, and I think it's unacceptable for United to be happy with a draw in that game. There's an interesting parallel there with the men's side, as I think Ten Hag did the same when he drew 0-0, although it was away at Villa Park, and he was sacked not long after. So I do think that Skinner doesn't have a plan B, and he should be doing a lot better with the quality he has in games that he should win. Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the main points for me, as you guys both kind of touched on, is just when you look at United's list, they just aren't performing highly enough for the players that they have. But anyway, we won't spend too much more time on that. Head over to All for United to hear from people who maybe know a little bit more about that than me. But sticking kind of with Chelsea in the sense that we're moving on to talk Emma Hayes for a few minutes. This coming weekend, the US women's national team, now obviously managed by Emma Hayes, are coming to London to face England. So that's been something I know a lot of people have been looking forward to. There are a few surprises in the squad list. No triple espresso fuss, which I was a little bit gutted about. Was definitely looking forward to seeing that front three, but nonetheless, I'm sure it will be, well, it could either be a really interesting game or it could be the most boring game you've ever seen. Could really could go either way. So we'll see. We'll be there to find out. I believe Emma Hayes had a press day today, and it was at a pub in Camden or something, which I thought was so cool. She was like pulling pints for the journalists. I thought that was brilliant. I love that from her. But are you guys heading to the match? Are you working? Are you going as fans? Will you be watching from home? What are your plans, Laura?
Sadly, I'm going to be watching from home. I'm currently in Nottingham, so it's logistically challenging to get to Wembley at the moment, but hopefully back in London soon and able to go and see more like Lionesses and etc. But yeah, this time be watching from home, and I'm looking. I was speaking of before, and I just don't feel as much hype around this international break, even though this feels like a huge game, like technically European champions versus Olympic champions, which is obviously huge, but yeah, it doesn't. I don't know if it's just me and I've not kind of gotten the hype, or like you said, like with the kind of squad selection, etc. It's not caught me in the same way that some do. But Emma Hayes coming back to England is definitely exciting, and I did love that press conference. And I'd advise anyone to, I won't quote it here, but Susie Rack's post on Blue Sky was very funny relating to that press conference. So do go and have a read of that.
There we go. Yes, I will definitely be checking that out after this. Someone has in the comments said, when was the last time Emma Hayes lost to Wembley? One of the FA Cup finals. Must have been. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. I was there in 2017 when Arsenal won the FA Cup final. Whether my memory is slightly failing me, so I can raise you that, but I'm happy to stand corrected. Also, lots of encouragement to check out the press conference. So I'll add that add that to my list. I saw lots of tweets and things about it today, but I need to catch up on it properly because it honestly sounds brilliant. I wish I was there. But Irvin, what about you? What are your plans? Are you joining us St Mary's lot who are making the venture, or?
No, I won't be going to the game, unfortunately. I'm working for a non-league team right now, Henworth Villa. So we're traveling to Farnham Town. It's a top of the table clash, so it's going to be a big day for us. Although I would love to be at Wembley. Yeah, I was there for the Germany game a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, what a game that was! 7 goals, and I think Serena came under a bit of fire there for not picking the informed players. Of course, we have Grace Clinton on the bench, Jess Park as well. And I think in this game, I think more fans would like to see more young blood in starting. And, like in the South Africa game, it wasn't a great game as well. But, Jess Park and Grace Clinton, I think these are the two best young midfielders that England have. And, it's good to start them early, give them some experience in friendlies. So, yeah, I think they'll be the next generation of footballers in England.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Grace Clinton, as many of us have been, kind of a big advocate for her getting those England minutes. However, her performance against Chelsea left a lot to be desired. So I'll be interested to see if we think that has any impact at the weekend. But I'm going to ask you both, which I don't usually do this, I don't think, but I'm going to ask you both for predictions for the match. Doesn't necessarily have to be a scoreline, could be something to do with lineups, could be anything really, but I'll ask you both to give me at least one prediction. It can be a score or can be anything else. I'll go Laura first.
Putting me on the spot here. I'd like to see Tullis Joyce in goal for the USA because I think, I don't know if it's Hayes or someone, it might just have been someone random on my Twitter, to be fair, but said kind of like the familiarity with English football is potentially a bonus, having her play in the WSL. And yeah, Tullis Joyce, she's obviously been fantastic for United, so see how she gets on. Obviously, Alyssa Nair has just announced her retirement from international football, so it's kind of who's going to take that mantle now, and I think that'll be really exciting.
Yeah, 100%. Irvin, what about you?
I'll go for a high scoring draw, maybe 2-2. I think even though USA are without like a couple of their key attackers, Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith, I think they were superb at the Olympics. But still they have a lot of quality players, and with England's leaky defense, I can't see them keeping a clean sheet. But yeah, I do think it'll be another high scoring affair, 2-2, and yeah, hopefully something that will entertain the fans.
Interesting. There we go. Well, Sean says 0-0. I'm on the fence. I think it could either be like a 0-0 or it could be like 4-3. It could go either way. We've already got some frustrations. If Serena Wiegmann plays Stanway for a full 90, I will scream. That's honestly fair enough. Fair enough. I think Georgia Stanway could probably do with a bit of a rest, and a friendly might be the time to give it to her. We shall see. We shall see. I think the US are a very strong team, even without that front three, as I've lost the comment now, but somebody pointed that out. I think as much as I will fully admit one of those people that has been ever so slightly swayed by Sonia Bompasta and thinking, I think Emma Hayes is an unbelievable manager, but is she as unbelievable as I thought? But what she has done with this US national team is crazy. When you look at their World Cup and then you look at their Olympics, I know they're different tournaments, but wow, that is not something that we see in football or just in sport, full stop, very often at all. So I am excited to be at Wembley, as much as Wembley is my worst nightmare when it comes to travel and to getting back home again. I will still be there. And I really hope that it's not 0-0, Sean, otherwise I'll be very upset. But moving on, I thought that we could also touch a little bit on the FA Cup. So the FA Cup draw took place earlier today, and have seen a few different comments about, I think the draw kind of buffered and wouldn't load and people couldn't watch and there were technical difficulties. So I know some people were frustrated by that. Lewis put out a really good, I thought, club statement on that. But there are also some really interesting draws in there. So we will speak about both of these things. First, I thought I would ask you, Irvin, what you thought on that kind of idea of people being frustrated about the technical difficulties. Because where I kind of sit on that is that I understand that these things do happen, and I understand that it's not necessarily anyone doing anything intentionally to spite women's football. However, I do completely understand the frustration. I do think it's important to acknowledge the discrepancies between that and how it might or might not have been different if it was the men's FA Cup draw, for example. But what was your initial reaction to those conversations today?
Yeah, as you said, I think the reality is this would never happen, and if it were the men's FA Cup draw, I think it speaks of like how like little diligence they give to the women's game. It's it was done on Instagram. It was not on the FA channels or on any of their websites. It feels amateurish. I think it's just a reflection of how little attention is being given to the women's game as much as has been done to grow the game. It is it's a prestigious tournament. It's a third round draw. People are watching. Clubs are just left in the lurch, just thinking what's going on for half an hour. So, and I think the Lewis women's team released a statement on Twitter. They started with a loading screen GIF, and then they released a statement. And I think it's something that needs to be covered by more media. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really interesting, kind of, especially what you're saying there about it needing to be covered by more media, because I feel like, I mean, I had a busy day today, so wasn't entirely kind of glued to my laptop, but most of what I have seen about it was kind of coming from just social media and stuff rather than press, which is a really interesting point. But yeah, Laura, what about you?
Yeah, it feels weird that we can't get a broadcaster to do this. This isn't a criticism of like the fact that it was done or who it was done by, etc. But I think, why aren't the broadcasters after this? Like, it can be quite a set piece thing, like do it after the rounds. And I know it's lower down the tiers, but it just feels different to the men's. And I know that's not inherently a bad thing. But this is quite a prestigious competition, and it doesn't feel like it's being treated as such. It's kind of like we're just throwing around the draw, like who wants it next, who wants to host it, and let's get different people. And I interviewed Jean Williams today, and she was making some really interesting points about kind of like the pink. It's not like the best word, but the kind of pink washing of women's football, in the sense that it's marketed specifically towards a group of women that aren't necessarily the best target audience. Not that it shouldn't be marketed towards women as well, but it's like, why does it have to be this kind of like Instagram? And I know Nikki Dosa has called it like the Taylor Swift demographic. This family-friendly, fun thing. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. There absolutely is. But when it's something like a prestigious FA Cup draw, why can't it be through formal channels and guaranteed to work? It does feel like it cheapens it a little bit. And I know, like, and yeah, it's a really tough one, because you don't want to kind of like criticize the way it was done. Like, there are clearly some benefits to that, and there's some fans that will love that and engage with that, and that's really positive, and we want to be as inclusive as possible. But I don't think it's inclusive to be on a stream that doesn't work and you can't watch half the draw, and you're sacrificing lower clubs down the tiers, and not treating them in the same way that's like making it good. And yeah, I think Sean makes a really good point there. It's on a mobile, like, that's not going to clip into good shape. You can't show that on TV. And it's just like, it's like you get taught mojo at sports journalism courses, like mobile journalism. It's just like, that's not what the FA Cup draw is on. That's like what you go and do vox pops in the street on. And maybe it's too traditionalist. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too traditionalist in football and not being inclusive enough, but it just feels wrong and cheapening the sport.
Yeah, honestly, I completely agree. I think that's really well put. I'll read just a little bit of the statement that Lewis put out, because I honestly read it and thought, yeah, fair play. Lewis I think, are a club who do a fantastic job at really pushing the women's game forward in the most kind of inclusive and sustainable way possible. But they've said mistakes happen and no one is perfect. Those operating the stream and those hosting the draw are not to blame. This incident, though, is just another reminder of the lack of oversight and disrespect that remains in the women's game. Women's clubs up and down the country already suffer from a lack of investment and a lack of respect within our footballing institutions. Investment across the board is needed to raise women's football to where it should rightly be. So what Lewis are kind of, I think, asking for, as you guys have touched on, is just that respect that we are now seeing shown to the WSL, for example, to just extend beyond that, because that's not how we grow the game as a whole, is by only championing the highest level, because it's not sustainable. It doesn't make it entertaining, doesn't really help anybody in the long term. So it kind of makes me glad to hear that kind of general consensus from us and from in the comments, because I understand that sometimes things are never straightforward, but the problem, as you guys have kind of pointed out, is why is it even happening in this way in the first place? Just isn't a situation that should really be arising. And as this, yeah, go ahead, Laura.
I also want to say that, like, obviously it was done by the people that host Counterpress, and I love Counterpress. Like, I listen to it all the time, and I think it's a great podcast. But I think there's a space for having them on a channel. Like, I think you can combine those two things. They don't need to be people that are doing on Instagram. I'd love to have the people that host Counterpress on, like Sean saying, like potentially a YouTube channel for the FA, or if you can't, like, have it on TV. You know, the BBC Sport carry the men's one, right? I think, and they have different people on to host that and draw the balls. Have Counterpressed on that, absolutely. That's not a criticism here. I'd love to see them do that, but I think it's like what we're saying. Yeah, the Instagram thing just feels a bit weird, and the fact that it doesn't work, and it's in portrait, yeah, all just a bit strange.
Yeah, 100%. It just feels like there's a lot that maybe could or should have been done to avoid that happening. And it's almost like, why wasn't it thought about? But anyway, moving on to the draw itself, rather than the kind of issues and dramas surrounding the draw, there were quite a few fixtures actually that have stood out to me upon initially kind of looking at it. So one of those is Southampton versus Bristol City, two obviously championship sides who already face each other a couple of times this season. So that I'm kind of immediately drawn to. But we've also got Brentford Fulham. So that was probably the biggest one for me, that I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, I'm not too sure yet where that will be played. But that hopefully is a really good chance for both of those clubs to kind of make a real go of it. But yeah, were there any draws, any fixtures that stood out to you, Irvin, when you were looking at the FA Cup draw today?
Yeah, as you said, I think Brentford Fulham, London derby. It's always nice to see, London derby with two clubs. And yeah, I think Brentford to be here, like, is already a huge achievement for them. They are a 6th-tier club. They beat London Seaward, who are 2 steps above them in the second round. And I think the manager, Carly Osborne, has said that, every step of the way from here is making history. And, it's something of like a magical cup run for them. And, it's as a team who are in the 6th tier, it's not easy to battle teams who are, above them. And I'm really excited to see how far they can go. And also Durham against Birmingham. I think it's both teams at the top of the championship. I think that will be a good tie between two teams who we could see in the WSL next season. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. No, that's a great point and really, really exciting. Laura, what about you? Any others, or was that kind of the main one for you as well that stuck out?
Yeah, definitely others. Just on the Brentford Fulham one, I think Brentford particularly have been pushing to get out that, because there's only one team that can get out of that league. And I just, slight plug here, but we have had a Brentford player on this channel to speak to us about that, and in the title push last season. and she speaks really well on kind of how it's been to only have one promotion spot, and they've kind of just missed out, and it's so close a couple of seasons running. So it feels like they very much deserve to be in Fulham's league, and it'll be a really like, I mean, obviously they've kind of already had a bit of a like giant killing as you would, or upset in their cup run, but just another really good test to see how they do in the league above. And do go and watch that video as a bit of a like pre-match thing. To give the context of that. I think another one that really stood out for me was so it's currently 2 oars in there. It's Long Itchington or Nottingham Forest versus Burnley or Bradford City. So depending on that, how those 2 go, if Nottingham Forest get through, which you probably expect them to, obviously anything can happen in the cup, which is why we love it. But Nottingham Forest, if they do get through, and if Burnley get through, then that could be a really interesting match between 2 people right at the top of the FAWL Premier North. And Forest are currently at the top of the table on 29 points. Burnley are third, 4 points behind, but they have a game in hand. So kind of only 1 point if Burnley win that game in hand, separating them in the table is, really exciting to kind of maybe see how they match up in a cup match as well as kind of in the league. But yeah, Long Itchington is a good name, so maybe we can root for them as well. I think that was the key one that stood out to me. I mean, there are loads of them. Durham versus Birmingham, obviously been mentioned, definitely stands out. I think I also just look for like could there be a really good story, like a good upset. And yeah, I'll give Portsmouth versus Stevenage or Luton a shout out for Barry, because obviously a big Stevenage fan and works for the club, so I'd like to see Stevenage do well.
Yes, that was one of the first things I looked for as well. Where are they? So yes, fingers crossed for Barry there. Another one that I thought, again, that kind of stood out to me was Charlton versus Lewes. Lewes obviously went down from the Championship last year, but Charlton have kind of not had the best run as of late. So it will just be interesting to see those kind of old foes go up against each other, even if it kind of the result is as expected. I think it could just be an interesting game. I'm hoping to try and go to that one. Because I think there's a lot of potential there for some excitement, if nothing else. But yeah, we love the FA Cup, and I think that's why people were so kind of disquieted by the draw being a little bit underwhelming, for want of a better word, in the sense that technical difficulties got in the way of the magic itself. But let's have a look at the comments and see what people are looking for. I always look out for the fixture that has the longest away trip. Yeah, fair enough. That's always an interesting way of looking for it. Sean is buzzing that Gwalior United have got London City Lionesses. Great opportunity for lots of Welsh footballers to showcase what they can do against a class team. There we go. That's a great shout. Also emphasising the tasty fixture that will be Birmingham versus Durham. Yep, 2 really competitive championship sides. So that is sure to be a good one. Moving kind of slightly on for the FA Cup, as has been raised in the comments, here in America, the NWSL rather, is booming. It most certainly is. So playoffs ended this weekend. Did either of you manage to catch much of that? I know we didn't get a chance to chat about this before the show really, but did either of you manage to kind of keep up to date with what was going on across the pond this weekend? It's absolutely okay if not. I know time difference and stuff is a pain, but I just thought if we have time, we might as well chat about it a bit.
I've been following it, but I haven't been watching a lot of it. I have to cover the dreaded Premier League and all their horrible money for the job. So unfortunately, it means I miss out on actually interesting stuff. But yeah, I have been keeping abreast of what's happening, but sadly haven't been able to watch any of it at the moment.
Yeah, of course. What about you, Irvin? How kind of up to date did you manage to be? Obviously, I think the playoff final was at it was at like 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night. So I personally was asleep, but did enjoy catching up a bit the next day.
Yeah, not for me. I've not really been following the NWSL, to be honest. Just focusing on local football and the WSL. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other week about kind of the difference between the NWSL because I've watched it a bit and I've kept up with kind of as much as I can in over the last couple of months. But with time difference, firstly, it's obviously difficult, but it really is very different. NWSL football is so much more kind of transitional, I would say, maybe for want of a better word, than the WSL. But for anyone who doesn't know, Orlando Pride and Marta lifted the trophy. So congratulations to them. There was lots of lovely content out there. Obviously, Marta is an absolute legend of the game and is not necessarily someone that a lot of us who are kind of focused on the NWSL, but more so on the WSL, have maybe engaged with as much, but you just can't help but be enthralled watching her, like at the Olympics, for example, this summer. So Sean has said, one thing I've taken from the NWSL is that it is by far and away the most competitive league in the world, and it's not even close. Very fair. I mean, after Chelsea went 5 points clear yesterday, just saying, we've become Liga F. It's a one horse race, which I'm not saying that I necessarily entirely agree with that sentiment, but it was quite funny to see people kind of airing those frustrations. We've got Joe saying, I feel that the WSL and NWSL are the best leagues. And yes, absolutely. Marta was unbelievable. Just an unbelievable person, I think, and just speaks so passionately. So yeah, that was a little bit of football history happening. And also, yes, it was the first time when she's been in the NWSL. So that was obviously quite a moment there. And got a Frauen Bundesliga fan. Absolutely brilliant. So much good football going on around the world. It's unfortunately impossible for us to cover it all in this short amount of time, but we do our best. Anyway, moving on to more cup talk. The Women's League Cup, formerly the Continental Tires League Cup, is also doing its thing. So we'll do kind of a similar structure of conversation to what we just did about the FA Cup. And Irvin, I'll start with you. Were there any results to you that stood out? Did you see much of the action this weekend? What were your initial reactions there as someone who's kind of very well across the top levels of women's football in England?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we see the WSL teams beating the championship teams quite comfortably. I think one result that stood out was Crystal Palace against Charlton. Those were two sides who were competing in the championship just a season ago, and Palace won the league by 1 point. And if I'm not wrong, in that season they lost both games to Charlton quite convincingly. But if you look at what happened last weekend, Palace won 2-0 and they beat Charlton quite convincingly. So I think it speaks to how much Palace have grown as a team. They started not great in the WSL. They lost 4-0 to Spurs and lost 7-0 to Chelsea. But I think they've found their feet, and yeah, I think they're going to be a great side in the WSL, and they could even avoid relegation, which is not it's not been done before, or like, not been done frequently. Bristol City went up and came down immediately, so it's not easy, because to bridge the gap between the championship and the WSL is something that needs to be worked on. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I say this on here every week, but Palace are staying up, guys. They're staying up. I'm adamant. They're not going back down. I'm not having it. They're staying. But no, I totally agree. I think you can see their development, and even though they haven't quite picked up the amount of points they would have hoped in the WSL, I really do think it's coming. And that's not just me being stubborn. I genuinely do believe that. But yeah, as you kind of touched on, it really does highlight the difference between the top of the championship and the bottom of the WSL, because you've got teams like Newcastle who have just been promoted to the Championship, I know, but have had a phenomenal start, yet lost 6-1 to Liverpool, who haven't looked completely convincing thus far in the WSL. And then London City Lionesses, another club who people talk about as a promotion contender, and they've lost 4-1 to West Ham, who I would probably have quite easily as one of the weakest teams in the WSL right now. So there's a lot to talk about there. But before we continue along that vein, Laura, were there any results that stuck out to you? What were your initial thoughts on the weekend?
Yeah, I think they were those two were pretty standout in terms of like looking at that. Looking at other things, potentially like the Durham versus Sheffield United, because obviously Sheffield United, they drew 1-1. Sheffield United haven't been doing too well in the Championship, so they're quite down near the bottom, and obviously Durham have been really overperforming expectations, I'd say, but doing really well this season in the Championship, and that was drawn 1-1. So I think we say this every week, but the Championship is so competitive, and I just love seeing like those kinds of results coming out, because it does really feel like, obviously I think Durham won eventually on penalties, but the League Cup is hilarious, isn't it? It's just so many little random things that you're like, why are you having penalties in a group stage? But we love it for it. I think it's part of the charm of the competition. But certainly, yeah, I think it doesn't say much more than, and obviously it's a cup and you don't know like kind of whether they're playing necessarily the strongest side. They might not be if they're focusing on the league, but I think clubs in the Championship would be inclined to, and I think, yeah, it's nice to see kind of, I don't think we see it as much in the WSL, so seeing kind of teams nearer the bottom of the table challenging with some of the teams near the top. This comment by Trebuchet also, I know we've had it up before, but it really intrigued me. So I did take a quick scan of the fixtures in the FA Cup and try and work out. From my kind of initial glance, I had two contenders, which I have looked up. So it was Norwich City versus Cheltenham. I thought that would be quite a long trip. And Chester Street versus, it's either Stoke or Loughborough. So I took Stoke as probably the further away, because it's quite on the west coast. So it's obviously not quite west coast, but it's further west than Loughborough is. So I compared those two, and I think Norwich versus Cheltenham just pips it, but I haven't gone through all the fixtures. They were just two that stood out. So if anyone wants to contest that, please feel free. I love a bit of nerdy geography, but yeah, I think that is the standout fixture.
There we go. Yeah. Geography is not my strong point, so I'm just going to take your word for it. They both sound like quite long trips. I really like this comment as well from Trebuchet. Group B is so interesting with no WSL teams, and yeah, exactly. That's a testament to exactly what Laura was just saying, with the fact that the Championship really is so competitive. Because I don't know if the same can really be said for the WSL at the moment. Sean saying he finds it difficult to get excited about the League Cup. I think a lot of people feel as though it does just get a little bit repetitive year in, year out in some ways. And I know that some, as Alan mentions here, aren't too keen on the format. And Emily picking me up on my Liverpool comments, we've been better than our points tally would suggest. Yeah, that's a fair point. I think Liverpool did overperform last season. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm probably being a little bit harsh, and I'm happy that you got your win yesterday, Emily. But one that stood out to me from this weekend as well was also Spurs 1-0 against Aston Villa. Despite not sounding like the most exciting fixture, and I wasn't at the game, the goal from Evelina Summonen, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but oh my word, absolutely unreal. Yeah, phenomenal goal. And Spurs have not had the start to the season that they would have hoped. So I know that Summonen said post-match pitch side that this should give them a massive boost and that the win would be really important for them. But yeah, I understand some of the frustrations with the League Cup. I understand why people don't find it as exciting, but it just, it almost is just, it's just a bit of chaos. It's always just a bit of chaos, isn't it? You never, anything can happen in any cup, but especially what we used to call the Conti Cup. It just, is always throwing some spanners in the works. But on that note, Sean says that Villa are just one big question mark. What are they trying to be? No identity or anything. I have to agree. I watched Villa the first game of the season and thought, wow, oh my gosh, they're going to be incredible. And then I don't know what happened, but they have not been incredible. Do you guys have any thoughts there? What do you think? What exactly is going wrong? Why are Villa not where they want to be, or why are they not where we might have expected them to be given the summer window, given the new manager, etc.? Laura, I'll start with you.
I don't think they've looked as bad as their results have suggested, and I think that speaks to kind of your point about that opening game where they looked like they had a lot of potential. But I think you could, like, if they'd started the season with most of their games this season, you'd be like, oh, you know what, new manager, they have quite a lot of potential. Like, there's not been like a real howler of performance from them this season, I don't think, unless I missed one. But generally, they haven't had like a really awful performance. It feels like, I think Trebuchet makes a good point, like that lack of end product. But they went 1-0 up against City, and it looked like a really good game plan, essentially. Like, in that first half, they looked like a brilliant team. I watched that match. They defended really solidly. They limited City, and this was a City with Hemp and Shaw. Hemp was obviously flying, now sadly injured. And then, got a goal on the break through their new signing, and it kind of looked rosy. It was like, oh, they're actually, you know, coming good on that potential that we saw in that game against Chelsea. They've been able to keep two top sides limited to goals. And then it all kind of crumbled in the second half. Hemp obviously played a blinder and set up Shaw, and it was a really good performance. But I think it's kind of been characteristic of a lot of their games where they've just not really been able to get a goal or do enough to go get a second or cling on to the end. And I don't know how much you can put it down to a new manager. It does just feel like there's something not quite there, not quite clicking. And I think there needs to be a bit of a, like, how do we sort that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think to me, it feels like they almost have a lot of the ingredients to be quite successful, yet somehow it isn't coming. And Joe makes a point here that I was just about to raise, which is that Villa need to keep Rachel Daly in the 9 instead of playing her out of position. I cannot emphasize enough how much I agree with that. I don't understand it. I don't think it's ever worked. I don't think it's ever going to work. And I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know why I'm quite so passionate about that when I'm not a Villa fan. But anyway, Irvin, what about you? What have your thoughts been on Villa so far this season? Not just in the Cup, but kind of watching them in the WSL as well.
Yeah, I think pretty much it's been quite the same as last season. They started slow as well. I think, as Laura said, it's about them not taking their chances. They went 1-0 up against City, and a couple of decent, like, starting 30 minutes, but they just haven't been able to grind out the results. And I think as the season goes on, much like last season, it will even out, and I think they will continue to improve. But of course, they're in a relegation scrap, I think, and I think Palace will be looking at that and hoping to capitalize on that for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think that's the thing. It's almost, if they don't get their act together a little bit, then other teams are going to start to capitalize more than they maybe have been. But I do think they have the potential still to not end up in any sort of terrible situation. So it'll be really interesting to see. And as everyone has kind of pointed out, last season, it's like, how different really is it to last season? So that's, it's not to say that they've gotten worse, but I think with their summer, I just expected to see more of a change, and I thought we did see it in the first game of the season, which I know you can only draw so much from that. But anyway, watch this space. But we have covered almost everything now, really. I just want to touch back on talking about the League Cup, because I think this comment from Emily is really interesting, saying if they stopped regionalising the group, took away the penalties in the group, and made the top 3 play in the groups as well, I think it would be better. What do you guys think of that? What do you make of that suggestion from Emily? Laura, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think if you go through those suggestions, I can't see a way you keep the group stage. I think if you're incorporating the top 3, there's not enough time in the schedule to have play a full group stage for them with Champions League football. I think it overloads the schedule, and I think it is kind of a tough problem to solve in some ways, because I think in the men's, like an established men's game, you have kind of you do have teams entering later on at various cup stages, and I think you'd probably just have to go knockout if you wanted them most of the way in. And I think it's different in women's football because you still need to kind of bridge gaps and maintain that competitiveness and try and bring those teams up in some ways. So yeah, it feels like it's becoming more and more outdated as a format. The way to solve it, I don't know, because every time if you keep the group stages, it feels really weighted to those teams that come in at the late stages. So I feel like you have to scrap them. But then it's like you're losing the magic of the Conti Cup and all it stands for. But maybe they should have done that with the rebrand. It's not the Conti Cup anymore, and it's lost that kind of name and the magic of that. So yeah, I think it definitely needs a bit of a reform. But I think if you're going to reform it, you probably don't keep the group stage. But I think that can be really good for some of the lower teams as well. So yeah. I don't have any answers. We've had this conversation every time. I can't do it.
No, I'm there as well. I'm right there on the fence with you. I don't know. I wish I had a solution. But I don't. Irvin, what about you? Do you have any other ideas or anything that you agree or disagree with there?
Yeah, just looking at it from like a lower tier club's perspective, I think like if they are drawn in a group with a WSL team, it's a guaranteed fixture. They get to play, to test themselves against one of the best teams in the country. So I think they would enjoy keeping that format. But for the fans, of course, it's quite a hassle to watch through like so many games in the group stages. And I think there needs to be a conversation, between all stakeholders to discuss what's the best way forward. But yeah, I think we could see some changes in the next couple of seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. And I think kind of touching on Emily's comments just bring to mind for me the fact that obviously Emily's mentioning the fact that there's not much women's football on after kind of over Christmas. But for championship players who maybe don't play international football, they don't play a game for absolutely ages now. And that's something that I don't know if we talk about that enough just in general. And again, it's not something that I've got a solution for, but I think it's important to raise that because yeah, I've forgotten the date exactly of when the championship comes back now, but yeah, obviously loads of championship players will be playing international football, but there's a fair few that won't be. So yeah, that's a bit of a sticky one, I think, and I know that that's something I think a lot of players are quite frustrated by because they feel like they don't get to play enough games, especially with there being only 11 teams in the championship this year. That's even less games for everyone. So that's really frustrating. And Connor kind of says here, rightly, in my opinion, I've always said that there's too many games to top internationals, but not enough for most of the players in that middle ground. Exactly. I think that's it. And again, I don't quite know what the solution is, but touching back on the Conti Cup again, it can be fun, but in an era of increased professionalism, this competition as it currently isn't tenable. I also need to stop calling it the Conti Cup. It's not actually called that anymore, but I can't help it. It comes out. But yeah, there we have it. We've almost covered everything there. We haven't delved into the international break tons, but there are some really exciting fixtures coming up. I'm excited for Wales Ireland. I know everybody should be keeping an eye on Sean's Twitter and Sean's work for that, because I'm sure he'll be able to tell you a lot more than I will. But also Scotland, Finland, I think should be a good one. I was chatting about this with some friends earlier, and Finland are obviously a good side, and Scotland really should be. So it's almost, I feel like I'm waiting for a matter of time until they really kind of do show that more widely. Because I do think we've seen some glimpses, but we just want more of that. And Austria, Poland, as Sean is pointing out, I forget that Connor follows Scotland. Am I right, Connor? So there's some tasty ones for you to look forward to. I actually wish that I was going to Edinburgh. I should have planned my life better, because if I did, then I'd be there. But alas, maybe next time. Northern Ireland, Norway, another one that could be certainly interesting. But yeah, and some news from kind of the international stage right now. Alyssa Nair announced her retirement today, I believe. So that's huge for the US. And also, Leah Valti is not going to be with the Switzerland squad for this international break, which is a real shame. Was at a round table with her at Arsenal, and I know she was obviously really looking forward to it, prepping for the Euros, back from injury. So that's a massive, massive shame for her, and it's a shame for Switzerland. Obviously, they qualify automatically because they're hosting the Euros, but it's still a really big shame. So I hope that that's not too detrimental to their performances, but alas, we will see. You mean Cardiff, right? Sean's calling me out for saying I would be in Edinburgh if I'd planned my life better. I'm sorry, Sean. I'm sorry. But yeah, what have we got here? Don't underestimate Finland. They have quality players, but yes, Erin Cuthbert and Casware is going to batter them. I don't know if they're going to batter them. I don't know if I go that far. I think it will be an exciting game. Yeah, I honestly think that one could go either way. Happy to stand corrected though. But yeah, otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up. I hope everyone has enjoyed us. Thank you for joining. It's been a really interesting chat. There will be lots more, I'm sure, going on next week, throughout the week, and look forward to keeping up with everybody's thoughts. But for now, thank you. Laura, where can everybody keep up with everything that you're up to at the moment? Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Probably just follow my Twitter. I think that's the best place. The Kids Are All Right podcast. There will hopefully be new episodes up ASAP. So yeah, just keep following those channels. And yeah, I think that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Irvin, what about you? Where can people read your work, and remind us a little bit about the non-league club that you're working for as well?
Yeah, I'm not very active on Twitter, but yeah, for the non-league club I work for, Hanworth Villa, we are in the 8th tier of men's English football, 5th in the league, so possibility of promotion. Yeah, we play at the Rectory Meadow, which is near Hounslow. So if anyone ever wants to drop by for a game, just feel free to reach out. Yeah, and if not, yeah, just happy to be on here, and it was a great chat. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Laura, go for it. Yes.
Sorry, I just remembered I should probably plug. We have a Blue Sky account now, all for Wofo. So if you are over there, go follow us on that. And it's just, I think it's just at all for Wofo, or all for Wofo .blue sky whatever it is, whatever the extra is, but just search all for Wofo and go follow us over there. And if you're not there, then go over on there and leave this Elon Musk, Donald Trump supporting platform.
Yes, exactly that. Couldn't have put it better myself. But yes, there we go. Thank you all. Take care, and we will see you next time.